Kraven the Hunter has officially hit theaters, and now that audiences can experience it, it's time to delve into full spoilers. That's precisely what I will be doing in this review. I'll explore the various Spider-Man Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the film. Surprisingly, there are quite a few. Highlight the major missteps the movie takes, discuss any redeeming qualities, and speculate on whether there were any hints at a potential sequel. I have a feeling that may no longer be in the cards. To start, I approached this film with the hope that its R rating would deliver some entertaining, violent action sequences. While those moments certainly stand out as the most enjoyable aspects, the rest of the film unfortunately falls short. Let's kick things off with the start of this film. They released an 8-minute clip, and you know what? Those 8 minutes are suitable. I can see why they decided to share it. Perhaps they hoped it would entice some viewers to purchase a ticket. We witness Kraven willingly entering a prison to get close to a target he intends to eliminate. That level of confidence, putting yourself behind bars, completing a mission, and then escaping no problem, that's a badass character trait. However, Sony never fails to let us down because right after those 8 minutes, we dive straight into a flashback origin story for young Kraven the Hunter. This was anticipated. We caught glimpses in the trailer and expected some backstory. What I didn't expect was that it would stretch to about 25 minutes dedicated to young Kraven. In these flashbacks, we discover that Kraven wasn't raised in the wild or honing his instincts in nature. Instead, he attended school in New York. He lacks the Russian accent, which makes me think they aim to prevent Aaron Taylor Johnson from sounding too much like Pietro. Not that it's a Russian accent, but actors do have their limitations. Russell Crowe arrives to pick up his 2 sons, Kraven and Dimitri, and delivers the devastating news that their mother has taken her own life. Rather than expressing sympathy or saying something comforting, he insults the boys by labeling their mother as weak and suggests they should bond over a hunting trip. Although in the comics, Kraven also has an abusive father, elements of Russell Crowe felt like he was just being the actual Kraven the Hunter we know to be ruthless, all about masculinity, proving they're the best hunting animals, not showing any signs of weakness. I was like, if this was 20 years ago, Russell Crowe would have been a perfect Kraven the Hunter against like Tobey Maguire. However, the characters lack depth and the dialogue is poorly written, leaving Crowe's performance feeling rather flat. I mean, we never even get to elaborate on what his business is in this movie. He just goes, "You know my business, and you can't show weakness." So, he does decide to take the boys hunting. And you know what? There's one moment as they're going out hunting for these lions and whatnot to celebrate the mom's death. Young Kraven surprisingly shares a piece of wisdom that feels true to his character. He remarks, "This isn't hunting with guns going up against animals. What kind of honor is there in that type of hunting? If you really wanted to prove your superiority, you would take on a lion with your own 2 hands." I found that to be a genuine reflection of something Kraven would believe in. But young Kraven doesn't have it in him to kill an innocent animal. If anything, he loves animals in this movie. Then he is attacked by one. His father seems willing to let his son perish, much like his wife did. Fortunately, we also have young Calypso, who is on a safari adventure with her parents. The most amusing aspect of Kraven the Hunter is how the characters' origins are portrayed. In the comics, many of them hail from a jungle desert environment and spend significant time there. However, in this film adaptation, the approach is quite different. Instead of immersing them in their native setting, the narrative opts for a single hunting trip while the characters are raised in a New York prep school. Calypso, for instance, is depicted as taking a random safari, only to return to New York to pursue a lucrative career as a lawyer. This alteration strips away essential elements of their identities to fit the film's unconventional storyline. On a positive note, there is a scene where her grandmother gives her a potion, which aligns with the comics, as Kraven often gains his powers through such means. As he consumes it, the blood of a lion is mixed in, providing an explanation for his animal-like instincts. Earlier trailers suggested that Kraven's abilities were deeply intertwined with animals, allowing him to see through a bird's eyes or command a wolf in battle. However, this film downplays those powers, leading viewers to assume he merely influences animals to act in a certain way. That's then where Kraven decides, you know, I've had enough. I'm leaving my father, leaving my brother who I love behind, and I'm going to go live on this piece of land that used to belong to my mom. This decision leads to a montage showcasing his journey of discovering his powers, including running alongside buffaloes. It reminded me a lot of Tobey Maguire when he got his Spider-Man powers, and he's just running around excited that he's now kind of a superhero. Except with Kraven, it ends with him brutally killing 2 poachers. This is also where I totally get people who were having a good time with this version of Kraven and what they did with Aaron Taylor Johnson. He's a charismatic guy, he's very likable, and even with the bad material he was given, Aaron Taylor Johnson made it work. And when he's not doing these awesome chase sequences throughout the film, where he takes down vehicles, shatters bulletproof windows, and scales buildings, there's a charming moment in a club where he compliments a woman on her perfume, only to learn she isn't wearing any. His nonchalant response, "Hey, sorry man, she was going to find out eventually. See you," adds a humorous touch. So they do a good job of making you want the powers Kraven has, and how he feels like a very invincible character. Unfortunately, the action sequences are sparse and overshadowed by less engaging content. So, he has become a hunter, dedicating his life to this pursuit, becoming a myth and urban legend as he targets criminals. Not only is he skilled at identifying those on his list, but he also excels at tracking anyone down. This is illustrated by the fact that all he had to locate Calypso was a tarot card. After 2 decades, he finally discovers her, which raises the question, why has it taken so long? It seems he has been on this quest for years. So how is it that he only finds her now? This situation brings us to the midpoint of the film, where we still lack a clear plot or sense of urgency. That changes when Kraven's brother, Dimitri, is kidnapped by the Rhino, who fears he might end up on Kraven's list, and would rather just take him out now. This is also the point where I want to discuss the Spider-Man characters and the numerous Easter eggs scattered throughout the film. Starting with Kraven, before we delve into his actions at the movie's conclusion, I found myself thinking, this Kraven is honestly a really nice guy. He's basically the Punisher. He has a moral code. And so, knowing this is supposed to be a Spider-Man villain, and in some fantasy imaginative world, Sony plans to someday have these guys meet. Even though we know that's not happening, I couldn't help but wonder, why would he ever want to fight Spider-Man? Then there's a moment where Kraven is exposed to a toxin, and one of its initial effects is to unveil your deepest fear. To my surprise, Kraven's greatest fear turns out to be spiders. Spiders? Really? So one day, he'll just see Spider-Man on the news and decide it's time to go haunting? What kind of dumb Easter egg level of setup is that? Like, how is that supposed to mean anything? Then there's a character in the film that I believe could have been completely omitted without any impact on the story, and that's Christopher Abbott portraying the Foreigner, a lesser-known villain from Spider-Man comics. He's depicted as a soldier at the peak of human capability, lacking any superpowers. In the comics, he possesses the ability to hypnotize his foes, giving him an advantage in combat. However, the film attempts to incorporate this in a rather absurd manner. He approaches his target and begins counting down from 3. 1, 2, 3. And because the person he was going after is in this hypnotic trance, it makes it appear like he's a speedster, like he has these superhuman fast abilities when you're just kind of hypnotized. His sole motivation stems from a past incident where Kraven killed his mentor, leading him to seek revenge and ally with the Rhino. I found it amusing every time he counted, as the film tried to present it as something impressive, but it came off as ridiculous. Ironically, he's one of the few villains in the movie who poses a genuine threat to Kraven, where Kraven almost dies. But that whole battle takes place in a jungle with Kraven fully geared up while the Foreigner wears a cashmere sweater, creating an awkward visual, but he takes an arrow to the face thanks to Calypso. Honestly, hilarious way to die. So, that was just a waste of a Spider-Man character thrown in here. Then we get on to Rhino. Let's talk about Alexandra Navallo, who portrays him. He genuinely seemed to be enjoying himself despite the terrible script and dialogue. At one point, there's a discussion about a hunter who has harmed their people, and he chimes in with, Kraven the Hunter, the sneaky man, the guy who will get you in your dreams. It's the stupidest thing, and there's another part of the movie with no explanation. We went from one scene, we cut to him at his desk screaming and screeching. I couldn't help but laugh out loud in the theater, but it just made no sense. We were in one scene, Then we cut to him screaming and screeching. There's no reason why he just did it, but okay. He was featured in the flashbacks of the young Kraven. His main goal was to earn the respect and admiration of Kraven's father. However, due to his asthma, his father perceived him as weak and was reluctant to engage in business with him. That's haunted him all this time. And well, he escalated his condition by working with a doctor named Miles Warren, who in the comics is another Spider-Man villain known as the Jackal. Although we don't see this doctor or the Jackal in action, his name is certainly mentioned. You can for sure bet that his name was brought up and being set up so that if they do a sequel, they can expand and do something more with these Spider-Man characters. The doctor assisted him in creating a medicine and formula that allows him to maintain his human form, but when he stops taking it, he transforms into a rhino, gaining impenetrable skin. And this is now where we need to give Pan's Rhino an apology, because he is now officially the second worst rhino that has ever been out there. This rhino, what the heck? Not only was the CGI on the face so terrible in full rhino form, this guy isn't actually even that big when he's fighting against Kraven the Hunter. He appears surprisingly small. In fact, Rhino is only about a foot taller than Kraven. That fight lasts about like 5 to 10 minutes. And Kraven is able to defeat him by sticking a metal pipe in the tube where he puts his medicine, and the camera zooms in on him dying as he's detransforming back into a human form. Again, the CGI is just so laughably bad. It makes the entire scene painfully cringeworthy. I'm still quite intrigued about who is intended to be the primary villain or antagonist in the film. We learned that the movie's release was postponed by a year, initially set for October 2023, due to extensive reshoots involving the Rhino. So if he was only supposed to be a tease for the next movie, who was the main bad guy? Was it the Foreigner? Was it supposed to be Russell Crowe the whole time? What was the last battle of this movie going to look like? Was it just supposed to be that fight between him and the Foreigner? Because, yeah, I can understand how that might have been quite underwhelming. But then, the last Spider-Man character that is teased and is actually the setup for Kraven 2 is Kraven's brother Dimitri, aka the Chameleon. Then the funniest part about the dialogue and everything that goes on in Kraven is they are not subtle at all. They explicitly state he's a hunter. Do you want to know why they call me the Rhino? He even alters his voice like a chameleon. It's almost comical how they casually drop the names of the villains, as if it's a clever twist. The first indication of these chameleon abilities emerges when he's older. He's at a club, performing a Harry Styles song like that took me out of the movie. We were in a Kraven the Hunter movie and Harry Styles is playing. I found myself thinking, wow, he sounds just like Harry Styles. Then he switched to another artist and I thought, wow, he sounds just like that artist too. And I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing. He's very good at changing his voice like a chameleon. I must say, the chameleon from the comics is an incredibly fascinating and underrated character. I would love to see him featured in a live-action Spider-Man film someday. And let's not even mention that character named Dimitri from Spider-Man. Far From Home. He wasn't chameleon then, and he certainly isn't now. So let's move on from that. I genuinely believe the chameleon deserves a spot in a real Spider-Man movie. Throughout the film, he plays the role of the timid younger brother, the one who causes embarrassment for their father. Despite this, Kraven has a deep affection for him, and their bond is quite touching. I appreciated the dynamic between them. Whenever he gets kidnapped and Kraven rushes to rescue him, I genuinely felt sympathy for him. They cut off his finger, they torture him, all this bad stuff. I was like, Kraven, go get your brother. However, by the film's conclusion, after all the antagonists have been dealt with, Dimitri steps up to take charge of the Kraven family business. Kraven warns him, I can't let you do this, which felt like a sudden shift to a darker side for him. It did feel like a 180 turn out of nowhere, him just kind of going evil. The most surprising twist comes when he recalls a conversation with Rhino about a miraculous doctor, Miles Warren. After visiting this doctor for an unconventional procedure, and we get this really hilarious, laughable shot of Dimitri turning into Aaron Taylor Johnson. But he's an entire foot shorter, staring at his older brother. And it is just meme material, and as he walks away, we see the iconic mask from the comics, which I must admit looked incredibly cool. That's one of the things I also hate about these Sony movies. Aside from Madam Web, I think the costumes and overall aesthetics of the Sony Spider-Man spin-offs are quite impressive. Morbius looked good, Venom looks fantastic. Just needs that white spider on his chest. Kraven, when he finally wears his vest in the last second of this movie, and these two shots in the trailer are not in the film at all, and that mask of the chameleon also looked pretty badass. But it seems we won't see much more of that. I doubt we're actually going to get a sequel where Kraven would fight off against his brother. I'm skeptical about a sequel featuring Kraven battling his brother. While a part of me would have been curious to see that, it would mainly be for the potential of creating more amusing and absurd memes. The film hints at a theme with the line, "I think there's an animal in all of us," suggesting that if the series continues, Kraven's adversaries might be other Spider-Man villains with animal traits. For instance, Scorpion could be reimagined as a mutated version rather than just a guy in a mechanical suit. There's also the possibility of him facing off against Dr. Octopus someday. Morbius, being a mutated bat creature, fits this animal-themed narrative, indicating that future films might revolve around Kraven chasing down Spider-Man villains that have like an animal-like power. The movie was truly a mess. What frustrates me the most is seeing such legendary characters like Rhino, Kraven, and Chameleon misrepresented in this film. These are real Spider-Man villains that I've cherished since childhood, and I was eager to see them in a proper Spider-Man movie battling against him. Now, they're off the table because Sony chose to create a film that received a mere 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. You may recall that the original concept for Spider-Man 3 with Tom Holland involved him facing off against Kraven the Hunter, especially if they couldn't secure Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield for No Way Home. That was the plan, and while I appreciate what No Way Home delivered, I still yearn for a Kraven film. A well-done Rhino and a chameleon appearance would be fantastic. Unfortunately, this movie serves as the first introduction to these characters for many viewers, and I can't see why anyone would be excited for a future Kraven film after experiencing this version. It leaves them with little reason to care. Let's hope that over the next 3 years, while Sony takes a break from these spin-offs, they can produce significantly better films. Share your thoughts on Kraven the Hunter. What you enjoyed, what you found lacking. Do you think a sequel is on the horizon? Were there any Easter eggs or details you noticed that I might have overlooked? Feel free to share anything and everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe. As always, I'm Andrew. Take care.